Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping episode 272 for June 1st, 2026. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening. Speaking of the pipes, I may need to change the music because we're running into some licensing issues, but hopefully we'll get that all worked out by next week. That's something that came up after the chit show last night. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out this evening. Let me remind everyone to please do thumbs up the video if you haven't done that already, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to both the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose support and encouragement we would not be able to keep doing this, as well as our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping Show. We are drinking Whistle Pig Farm Stock Rye, of which a considerable amount remains, but this is very good. It's 43%, and one of the cool things about this particular thing is they actually give you the mash bill recipe on the back, and they tell you 15% is 4-year-old Vermont whiskey, 37% is 6-year-old Vermont whiskey, and 48% is 6-year-old Canadian rye whiskey. So there's a lot of rye in this. It's a very high rye. It's very dry in the mouth, but I love rye whiskey. So thank you. You know who you are. So in any case, we're going to talk tonight about fantasy war games and the degree to which they tie into fantasy properties. In most cases, that's going to be an RPG, and I've got a bunch of games to go through tonight. And I do at least have one additional piece of news today as well. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out this evening. And if you'd like to help support the show, there's a whole bunch of ways to do that linked in the video description. If anybody would like a link to the Ardwulf Lair Discord community, I am throwing that in the chat right now, so hop on that. That'll be good for a week. If you're watching this after that, then you can absolutely reach me by email, and I will give you your very own customized invitation. My email address is in the ticker at the bottom of the screen, so there's that. And we are actually clipping, clipping is the wrong word. We are punching Divine Right. All the counters in here are pre-rounded, except for the hexagonal ones, which are also a little bit rounded, to be completely honest. And I expect to finish this in about 10 minutes because there's 2 counter sheets, and everything's pre-rounded, so I hardly have to do anything. So let's see. We will see what we can do. I'll probably pull stuff from the YouTube library. There's also a new YouTube library tool, audio library tool that lets you create custom 60-second audio loops, and it's all AI generated. And I don't know if any of it's any good or not, but I can tell you that nothing I've generated with it so far has been worth a shit. So it's results are poor. We'll see what we need to do. There's other stuff. Divine Right is, I'm actually not sure about this, and this is one of the first things we're going to talk about. So we'll get to this in a minute. But first, I want to get to a piece of pseudo news that I want to make sure that everybody watching is aware of, and that is the last episode as of this morning. Actually, episode number 39 of the Multi-Man Publishing Podcast is a BCS deep dive featuring friends of the channel, Carl Fung and Doug Pitch from the Tabletop's Edge. Carl is the honcho of BCS and is intimately involved with the development, and he might even pop into to be having some kind of bullshit going on. I don't know what it is. Audio crashed. That was not a tab crash, believe it or not. That was just audio disconnecting somehow. As an experiment, let's pull this down for the moment. As an experiment, I am on the wrong camera screen too. How did that occur? Anyway, as an experiment, I am going to do a poll tonight. So let me pull that up. This is something we're trying a new feature that is built into StreamYard now. We'll see how it works. So this is the poll. You can answer it just by typing 1, 2, 3, or 4 into the chat. And you can, the question here is, have you ever played a tabletop war game? And I mean by this, not a miniatures war game. I'm talking, they don't necessarily have to be hex and counter though, but they probably do have counters. So check that out, and you can just type numbers in the chat. That's what the test was at the beginning of the chat, by the way, folks. I don't think so. The video is not playing and shouldn't have been playing, but you never know, to be honest. The other experiment I'm doing is I've downloaded Firefox, which I intend to use only for StreamYard. So we'll start doing that next week because I haven't set it up yet. So we got a bunch of stuff here. And where is the poll? Interesting. The comment will hide the poll. That is, we're trying this feature out, folks. We can do some cool community things with it, assuming that it works well. However, I have also already noticed that you cannot do a please select all that applies option, at least not yet. There are other options for this, but this is the one that's built into StreamYard, so we're trying it out. So again, if anybody hasn't watched the BCS show from Multiman Publishing, please do that. Unless you've already decided that BCS is simply not for you, in which case I think you are missing out. But you know, it's your call. I have never played Divine Right, but I have played a number of the other fantasy war games that we're going to talk about tonight. But we will start with Divine Right. Carl sure does look young, doesn't he? Sticking to the bottom, and I'm not seeing any problems with the punching. Oh, that one left a little dog ear. We can clean that up. That's not a big deal. So anyway, Divine Right, originally released by TSR of all people back in 1979, designed by Glenn and Ken Rahman, who designed a couple of the things on this list, actually. And this was a game that was not really around for all that long through TSR. At least it didn't seem like it. But its entire lifespan was kind of before I got into gaming. So I was unable to... it looks like a lot of folks are playing war games regularly, which is a great sign, by the way. So I've never played Divine Right. I've been aware of it the whole time. I picked up the Pungo Games reprint, Pungo Games being affiliated with Worthington Publishing. And they did a real nice job on this. It's got a mounted board. It's got all the fancy things that you would expect from a modern board game, but it pretty much retains all the original art. And you can see the artists credited here, Ken Rahman and David C. Sutherland III and Dave Trampier. And who's the other one? Barry Beedman. I'm not familiar with the work of Mr. Beedman, but can we do better than this, perhaps? I had something built for this, and now it ain't working. We'll go with we'll just go with this. It works fine. Yeah, I agree. I have not actually watched the entire video yet, but I've watched about the first half, and there's a really good discussion of BCS and why it's neat, and some of the mechanics and all that stuff. If you look at early issues of Dragon magazine, you will indeed find Divine Right variants. And it was Dragon by then, and this is well after the strategic review had sunsetted. Yep, nobody has voted never yet, but some people say a long time ago, which is, do we have I don't know how to get the analytics on this yet, but we'll figure that out after the show. It's all good. In the meantime, Divine Right, very highly regarded game. It had a lot of mystique around it from back in the day. One True Flem says it's a great game, massive struggle that's easy to teach. It's not very complicated, just from glancing at the rules. I can confirm that. And it is 2 to 6 players too. And I don't know if this 6-hour playtime is realistic or not, but it wouldn't surprise me given the vintage here. And we can even get what card sleeve sizes are for. Oh, isn't this cute? You can buy them directly through the BGG links. How about that? All right. Well, that's a nice feature. You don't have to take advantage of it if you don't want to. But the reprint from Pungo is really, really nice. This is possible, but to me, this is not just looking at the new counters at least, and also the map. It doesn't look dramatically different to me, but it could have been redone art. I feel like I can absolutely see the vintage TSR art style in the classic map. Is this the reprint? No, this is the TSR version of the map, for example. And then if we go and look at this is somebody's this is the reprinted map, and I mean it looks very similar to me, but I don't have the original to compare it to either. And there's an expansion coming out for this too, Expansion X, which is going to add a bunch of optional rules and some additional counters and a whole lot of additional cards. That whatever crowdfunding platform, I assume it's a crowdfund because this was, whatever crowdfunding platform they put it on, I missed it completely. So we'll have to see if we can pick that up on the flip side. But in any case, I do have it now, and I would like to try it at some point. It does. There are some, yeah. I mean, if this is in fact the 1977 map, the colors on the printed map don't look quite that bright. Is this the reprint? This is the 20th anniversary reprint map, which again looks pretty much the same, but it might have been redone. They might have retypeset it or something like that. It's not like they have the digital art from back in 1977 or 1979 after all. Every Day says that there were books written by one of the Ramans about the history of the lands used in the game. I don't remember ever seeing those. All right, we seem to have lost the sound again. I don't know. This is why we're switching to Firefox for this, folks. So I kindly, I definitely recommend checking out Doug's video playthrough series of Last Blitzkrieg. It is fantastic, and even though it is not a playthrough series, it is. You will definitely learn a lot about the ebb and flow of the game, the tempo of the game system, and a lot on the specific mechanics too. You will still need to read the rule book, however. I'll try and keep my eyes on the little pop-up button that said pop-up thing that says no, dipshit, your sound is off again. I have not put any water in this, by the way. So this is not exactly part of the topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Jeff Beeler asked, what would the first BCS fantasy game have as a topic? Now, I did a video a few months ago about the Harn neoprene map, which is enormous. It's like 5.5 feet by 3.5 feet. It's gigantic. The hexes are beautifully large. It's the same Harn map that I've shown off a million times. And one of the first comments that somebody made was, man, I would throw some Great Medieval Battles counters on that and fight it out as a war game. Don't think this hasn't occurred to me, folks. I would kind of like to base it off of an established game system. So something like Great Medieval Battles might actually work. Something like Crown of Roses in the block system, that might actually work fairly well. BCS is an interesting idea. I'll have to think harder about that. All right, Brant from the Armchair Dragons, welcome back to the show. And Alistair Logie, Stephen Michelle, Danny Seckery, and Stacky Limiter, of course, here as our intrepid moderators. Yendrik Mike is here. Turks 1966 is here. Where does Avalon Hill's Magic Realm and SPI's Games of Middle-earth fit into the list tonight? We will hear about those in a bit. And yes, as Squirrel says, I think these are the best fantasy maps anybody has ever done, ever. So, all right, so moving on from Divine Right, we've got a whole pile of additional things to pick through. I always thought that Divine Right was earlier than 1979, but apparently it isn't. If we look at versions here, this does include The TSR first edition, at least BGG says it's 1979, and apparently it even got a second edition from TSR as well. Honestly, I think it wouldn't happen on this show. I don't think this show is the natural place for it, but I could totally see doing a Dave Trampier tribute video, because I really liked his art. I really liked Wormy, the comic strip that appeared in the back of Dragon magazine for many, many years. And it's a sad story that befell Dave Trampier. He apparently just flamed out and left and started returning his paychecks from TSR uncashed. And nobody from TSR bothered to look into it, so they just assumed he was dead, which is a decision that a management team could make, I suppose. And we'll talk more about Dave Trampier too when we get to Titan, which is another classic from, I've got the Avalon Hill version, let's put it that way. And it turns out he was driving a taxi for another 30 years somewhere in Indiana, and nobody knew until somebody tracked him down, and he basically told him to get lost. But there was some, not really tonight's topic, let me put it that way. But Vale, Dave Trampier, definitely. All right, so moving on we're going to kind of start with early ones, but I'm not strictly going in chronological order here. The next one we're going to talk about is a game that I think most people will know as Dragon Pass. This was released by Avalon Hill in 1980, but it is a revision of an earlier war game. And both of these that we're going to talk about right now are war games. They are fantasy war games set in the world of Glorantha and designed by Greg Stafford, the creator of Glorantha, and his associates, the Chaosium team. The original Chaosium version was called White Bear and Red Moon, and I don't even know what this thing runs for nowadays, but hilariously, not that much, considering how old it is. And you can see, although there's some really nice art in this, predominantly by the late William Church, it looks like a game that was released in the mid-70s too, and this is 75, so it's very early. There were going to be 3 fantasy war games released by Chaosium. This was like the original plan back in the mid-70s. The first one was White Bear and Red Moon. And these are all very rich in Gloranthan lore too. The second of which was Nomad Gods. That's this game, released in 1977. And there was a third game that was supposed to deal with the hero questing and all that stuff. And that never really materialized. And in fact, we really never got really good rules for hero questing in any format. Gene Day, yeah, good call. I believe it is also the late Gene Day, for that matter. Kings and Things. Mike Reed mentions Kings and Things. Now, this originally appeared under the name King of the Tabletop. Was released in an issue of Dragon magazine back in the 80s sometime. It was later released by West End Games as its own standalone thing. Designer was Tom Wam in both cases, and renamed King of the Tabletop. And I remember getting the old cardboard insert that you got in the magazine back in the day, and I stuck those counters to the back of linoleum tile that was laying around in my parents' basement at the time, and that's how we played it. I really liked that game at the time. I think Brant brings it up, and I know Brant's a big fan of this game too. He says it's a blast, but the original King of the Tabletop from Dragon 77 is a better game, but with worse production values. Yeah, it's kind of like a build your own game out of it, right? But it is actually quite a good game. Christoph de Klerk says, if you remove the war from fantasy war games and tie-ins, we're only going to talk about games that are at least sort of war games here tonight. There are somebody was saying they don't really consider Magic Realm a war game. It is nevertheless on this list. I think it should be on a list like this and on a show like this because it's an Avalon Hill product. And it's another thing that people continue to be fond of today. One True Flame says he's got a copy of White Bear and Red Moon. I actually would personally, I don't have this. I would personally prefer a copy of Dragon Pass from Avalon Hill instead. just because I've got like a shelf space to put it. I don't have a place to really store White Bear and Red Moon and Nomad Gods. And if you look at the maps on these, I mean, this is the 70s here, right? So it's not bad for the 70s, but it doesn't look very good for today. And again, both of these are fantasy war games set in different parts of Glorantha. White Bear and Red Moon is set in Sartar, where there's a big struggle between the native Sartarites and the invading Lunar Empire. And Nomad Gods is set in the vicinity of Prax, where there's all these nomads out in the area that are like each tribe has like a totem animal that they ride around on. So they've got things like giant ostriches and stuff. It's pretty neat. Meandering Mike actually says it's a Grail game for him. And I kind of want this Nomad Gods. I mean, these are basically folio / Ziploc games. You can look at Nomad Gods here. I don't even think this thing came in a box. So bearing that in mind, it'd be neat to have it, but I'm not running anything down for this unless I see it, for a good price, perhaps on Noble Knight. So two formative fantasy war games as the wargaming hobby and industry, if that is what the term we would like to use, kind of discovered fantasy and science fiction games, but we're not really going to talk about those tonight. And yes, I had to cut my list in half when I decided it better just be fantasy. So two formative games from the mid 70s here. Originally from Chaosium, but one of which was originally eventually published by Avalon Hill. The relationship between Avalon Hill and Chaosium did sour after a while, predominantly over what was done with RuneQuest 3rd Edition, which was published by Avalon Hill. But this was several years before that. Another thing that we can talk about considerably. Well, it's really not that much later, at least if you're thinking of it as an Avalon Hill thing. I'll put the poll back up here. Okay. Is Dark Emperor. This is Greg Kostikian game. Greg Kostikian, of course, is a veteran of SPI, designed several noteworthy things for them, and would go on, I am reasonably sure after this, to design a number of really important, or design or be involved in the design of a number of really important RPGs, including the original D6 Star Wars RPG from West End Games, as well as Paranoia, also originally from West End Games. Currently, Drew, we'll talk about this. Yes, they did, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I'm reasonably confident that Nomad Gods and White Bear and Red Moon actually came in a Ziploc bag. Meandering Mike says, cool setting on Dark Emperor, kind of a subpar game. This is one of those games that I always wanted back in the day and never ended up actually buying it. You could see the map as this kind of cool. We can imagine some kind of meteor bombardment must have occurred at some point, because it's a heavily cratered landscape, and it's a neat looking game. It's not all that well regarded nowadays, but this is another one that I kind of would like to get at some point, and probably will acquire at some point. We could see the Avalon Hill counters here that look like mid 80s Avalon Hill counters, but there's nothing really wrong with them, and a cool piece of cover art too. Do we know who did this cover? Artist James Talbot. That may mean the cover. I don't know. That's annoying when that happens. Anyway, they just played this about a month ago, ignoring the attrition rules. Hero Quest. No, I would say I did not include Hero Quest in this list because, to me, Hero Quest, and I assume, bear in mind, there's a couple different games called Hero Quest. The one I assume we're talking about is the one that Milton Bradley released back in the day, and is actually a good game, but it is a straight dungeon crawler too. And I have not felt it necessary to include fantasy war games that don't include an actual war, with the possible exception of Magic Realm, because it really kind of doesn't. But this does, Dark Emperor. I think that's been on my wish list. This is another one. It isn't even necessarily clear whether Down with the King, designed by Glenn Ramon and Ken Ramon, the designers of divine right. It's not even really clear necessarily that this is set in a fantasy kingdom, but it is. So you are nobles who are plotting to overthrow the king, and this is a 2 to 6 player thing. It says 2 hours. I don't know how seriously I take that. I don't take the playtime on Board Game Geek very seriously most of the time. So I thought about including these. But I didn't. I don't have a visual aid for this particular product, but I will talk about it. And I didn't include them because, again, there's no real war here. There were 2 games released in the very late 70s or very early 80s from Metagaming called Melee and Wizard. Melee is a tactical fantasy combat game without magic, I will point that out. And Wizard puts the magic in there and gives you spellcasting characters. And eventually these were expanded into a full RPG, more or less, called The Fantasy Trip, which was reprinted by Steve Jackson Games several years ago at this point in a variety, actually, of enormous packages. I'm trying to keep the colors straight here. I've got one of the versions that Steve Jackson Games did back in the day, but it isn't the all-inclusive one. I got a good price on a very lightly used, and when I say very lightly used, I mean that there's some boxware. The innards of the game were completely intact. But it's a nice production, and if you prefer, like a lot of people do, I think, especially if they grew up as wargamers, if you prefer the grid of your RPG being a hex grid instead of a square grid like D&D has usually used, then you might like The Fantasy Trip, and it is a solid game system. I do not have Valley of the Four Winds on the list, but now that you've mentioned it, let's look that up. Valley of the Four Winds by Games Workshop. This dropped off my radar because it's from Games Workshop. This is a 2-player fantasy war game which pits the forces of good humans, elves, and dwarves against an evil legion of undead. Back in the day, Games Workshop did a bunch of general board games, a couple of which are really well regarded nowadays. Talisman was one of them, for example. Another one was Fury of Dracula, which did get reprinted at some point much later, and a number of the other ones have also gotten reprinted as well. And this is from Lou Pulsifer, who has a YouTube channel, by the way, where he talks about game design. This could be that Manry Mike says if they had a strong IP, it would have been a bestseller. It might have been. That's possible. Vanna Brandt says Rune Wars is set in the same world as Rune Quest from... Rune Quest is its own thing. I don't know if there's some stepping on IP territory or confusion or what here. And yeah, to be clear about this, Steve Jackson, American Steve Jackson, is the original designer of Melee Wizard and The Fantasy Trip. Well, I agree, but the calendar, unfortunately, that Pope Gregor, he has screwed us on that. Yeah, this is my thought. Runebound I've heard of. I don't have that on this list because I know nothing about it. And yeah, this is absolutely true. Even as far at the eastern end of this whole space of early creative designers in the hobby gaming industry, actually has its eastern terminus, as far as I could tell, at Akron, Ohio, because Tom Moldvay and Lawrence Schick were both from Akron. And Moldvay is, of course, not with us anymore, but Lawrence Schick, to my knowledge, is still around, and he lives in Ireland. Mike Reed says Ares Battle of Five Armies qualify. I'm going to more or less aim this towards some older games, but it would totally qualify. It is absolutely exactly what Mike describes here, which is a straight up war game. I don't know. I think the War of the Ring from Ares is pretty much a straight up war game, to be honest. I mean, there's miniatures with it and stuff. And I didn't include any of the Iron Crown stuff either, because those were all outside my area of experience, even at the time, let alone trying to figure out where these guys go, let alone... Well, screw it. I'll just pack them back up separately. It's all good. Ogre and Jev are science fiction games. So I didn't include them here tonight, but we could totally do another. I mean, believe me, I could fill a whole show up with the various Traveler tie-in board games. So that is the real reason why there aren't any science fiction games. Valley of the Four Winds is a pretty good call, though. I don't have any real knowledge of this game because obviously this was a UK thing, right? And we didn't see it very often. It's 1982, so it's, I was 9 when this came out and was totally unaware of it. Not a bad looking map for 1980, though, I'll tell you that. Games Workshop was a neat company back in the day. Battle Lore. Petrakis, thanks for mentioning this. I didn't include this either, just frankly because I didn't think of it. Because I like to think of Commands and Colors as a historical system to the extent that it is, as opposed to a fantasy or sci-fi system, even though there have been both fantasy and sci-fi implementations of those rules. Fresno Games Association. This is true as well. I've got at least one of these. I can tell you that. Let's move on from Valley of the Four Winds. Neat looking game that I don't know anything about in particular. Next up, we have also from Avalon Hill, Dragon Hunt. This was designed by a number of people with whose work I am unfamiliar. Willis Carpenter, Garrett Donner, and Michael Steer. And for Avalon Hill games at the time, I think you'll agree that this is extremely colorful and really not bad looking. Again, for what is this, early 80s? It's 1980, something like that. 1982. There were cards. Oh, those of us who remember these Avalon Hill cards for those games that contain cards were incredibly shabby Avalon Hill cards. To be fair, SPIs weren't really any better, at least not in any of the games that I've got. So there's that. We could start bagging these at this point. Dragon Hunt, it's Slay the Dragon type of thing. It's a game for 2 to 6 players. You play one of the valiant hero kings of Arawan, and the winner is the player who kills Brimstone the dragon with the kingdom's mage sword. And you can see the quite colorful counters and really kind of nice counters too. And these kind of look like they're bigger than half-inch counters, but they kind of don't. And I'm not sure about that. It's probably just Avalon Hill. It's probably just a standard Avalon Hill 240 sheet counter sheet. Thank you, Danny and Stacking Limit, for reminding folks, if you haven't liked the video yet, please feel free to do so and subscribe to the channel. So moving on, somebody asked about this, and this is a game called Elric. Released in 1977 by Chaosium and later redone by Avalon Hill. This is another one where I'd kind of rather have the Avalon Hill version, and I don't have this, just because it will shelve handsomely with my other Avalon Hill games. This is set in the world of Michael Moorcock's Elric stories, the Young Kingdoms, and you can see that this is fairly colorful as well. I will observe that this map is the same map that is used in the Chaosium edition, the Avalon Hill edition, and the Stormbringer role-playing game that Chaosium did several years after this. I want to say that was 81, 82, 83. But they had a license for Michael Moorcock. There is a new Elric game coming out that I am probably not at all interested in. I think it's from Free League, and I don't know which of Free League's house systems it will use. This is I don't know this, but this is how I imagine this conversation happening too. We'll just print this all ourselves, and we don't really care. Oh, the Willow game. Who did that? Was that West End? All right, the sound is cut out again. Hopefully we're back. Barbarian Kings is one that I left off, mostly because I don't know much about it. We presume somebody mentioned Charlie Crank, who was one of the designers, early Chaosium designers, had a lot. Is Charlie still around? I actually have no idea. Maybe. Maybe. It looks like Charlie wrote this himself too, but this is from Chaosium, so who knows? So hopefully he's still with us. I know that a number of the people, of the early Chaosium folks, have passed away at this point, including Lynn Willis and Greg Stafford and William Church and several other individuals. I will also point out that look at this fancy looking Hobby Japan version, and there were French versions of this too. In fact, this might be it. No, this is the original Chaosium box cover. It's actually a pretty nice box cover, I think. Although, yeah, I think it's a better box cover than the Avalon Hill one got. But the map is I believe the Avalon Hill board is mounted and the Chaosium one is not. But neat looking game. Danny Secretary wishes there was a movie. Who's the casting choice for Elric? Once upon a time, that would have been Julian Sands. Nowadays, I don't think so. At one point, you could have credibly given it to Tilda Swinton, I think, and it would have worked. Tom Hiddleston might work. I don't know. Gregory Day says that Crank designed the card game Mythos. Was that the Cthulhu card game, the Cthulhu collectible card game that they did as part of the collectible card game phase? Because there's been a couple different games by that name. All right, I may have just caught it fast enough so that it wasn't a problem. These messages, at least a couple of these messages, are the free little icon codes from Board Game Geek. I am 100% behind the idea of bringing more attention to Elric, specifically, but also to a lesser extent, I think, some of the other Eternal Champion stuff that Michael Moorcock has done over the years. But I think there's a good reason why Elric was always the most popular of those. All right. David Bowie is also dead, so we can't use him. Sting is not dead, but he's too old at this point. I could totally see Bowie, to be completely honest. Oh, there would be complaining about this, but Elric, I think it fits for that character. This has happened a couple of times. I'll believe it when they start actually shooting or casting. Oh, this is a cool movie. This is the second Hellboy movie, as I recall. But it's actually a pretty cool movie. I don't know that Moorcock is quite as insufferable as Alan Moore, but I won't tell you that he's not insufferable at all. Moving on from that, we do have Magic Realm, a famously complicated and extremely colorful and frankly well-loved game from the late 70s from Richard Hamblin, who is somebody that we might recognize the name from other games. This is pretty. There's no dungeons in it as such. There kind of are, but it's really more of a dungeon crawler than a war game. But in play, and I've seen it played, but I haven't played it. It feels a little wargamier, perhaps not for any particular mechanical reason. For a long time, there was a print and play version of Magic Realm that you could, at great laboriousness, print and play yourself. There's a computer adaptation for it. You can play on it through a web browser. Billy Idol's too old. Lee Pace is fantastic. Lee Pace is the best thing about that Foundation series on Apple TV. Every Day says this inspired, I presume we mean Magic Realm, inspired Dragon's Dogma, which is, there is a computer game called Dragon's Dogma, right? I mean, if what you like about war games, to touch on what Mike Reed is saying here, if what you like about war games is the mechanical intricacy, and I'll tell you, to be completely honest, that's a factor for me. I like intricate games. You might love Magic Realm because it's pretty intricate. It's super complicated. It's by the standards of its time anyway. I think with if somebody like rewrote the rules and made some optimized player aids and stuff like that, I think you'd probably make this thing quite a bit easier to play. Yeah, Cillian Murphy's a great actor. It could work. Neil Badkey mentions you could find living rules for Magic Realm, and there's a reprint by an individual. Dragon's Down. Okay, yeah, Dragon Dogma is its own thing. It's a computer game as far as a computer game that I have not played. I will point that out. Don't forget the poll, folks. We've got just put 1, 2, 3, or 4 in chat if you want to vote in tonight's poll. We may make this a recurring thing, although we may or may not continue to use the StreamYard gizmo for it. Moving on from that, we have another one from Avalon Hill, Mystic Wood, designed by Terrence Peter Donnelly. Artists listed here are Ken Nishiue and Polly Wilson, and Nishiue is the same fellow that did the Elric cover as well. Now this one, this is a fantasy game, and you're knights doing quests and stuff, but I certainly don't feel like this looks like a war game to me, and I probably should not have included it. But anybody who's actually played it, let me know. There are cards there. Somebody's playing it here with miniatures. Mystic Wood. Oh, this is originally from Gibson. How about that? I guess I shouldn't be surprised. So originally released by Gibson's in 1980 and then reprinted by Ariel in the same year, or one way or the other. And then Avalon Hill picks it up in 1982. So interesting game. I don't know a whole lot about it. Doesn't look super wargamey to me. Agri says you'd flip the cards as you moved. Mike says that it's very tight, much less sprawling than Sorcerer's Cave. I could kind of probably see this. I don't know if Tom Felton's got the acting chops because I've only ever seen him in one series, but that would be fine. Timothy Chalamet. I think it could work. It could work. I also am not sure Timothy Chalamet has the acting chops either for that particular role. He's certainly very good in a number of things that I've seen him in. All right, next up. Now, this is the reprint from Valley Games, I think, that's pictured here. This is Titan. This was originally released by, I can never remember, Gorgon Star Publications in 1980. And if you've ever seen this thing, it's like literally in a pizza box. And then Avalon Hill, of course, did their well-known edition in 1982. This is a pretty cool game. The only serious complaint I have in general about Titan is that it does take a good long time to play. It can play fast if everybody knows what they're doing. It is very much a fantasy war game. The board is not exactly a hex grid, but functionally it's kind of like a hex grid, right? Where every space has 3 adjacent spaces. I think that's an accurate statement. It looks like it is. There are different terrain types, and when you have a battle in a specific terrain type, you would zoom into this battle board, and you would fight the battles out with the pieces that were in the two armies, and it was pretty cool. Oh, I imagine this is quite expensive nowadays. Let's see what the secondary market on Titan's looking like. We'll look at the geek market here. So Avalon Hill, as low as 50 euros and as high as $200 Canadian dollars. The Valley Games edition looks like it's going for between 80 euros and $120. And there's a lot of copies of this on sale on the geek market at the moment. I did, by the way, have to tap into RPG Geek to pick up some other products here that we'll get to in a bit. But no, I could vouch for this game. I would have liked to have played this a little bit more, but we played this a number of times back in the day, and it was pretty fantastic. All right. Just checking the chat here. This can happen in Titan. I will say this. There's good reasons for this. It would be a hard sell. The good reasons for that. And Every Day says the Gorgon Star version is usually over 500. I am perfectly happy with the Avalon Hill edition. Another thing that I will observe here that is true of the Avalon Hill version, and I think probably not the case with the subsequent versions, it's probably true of the Gorgon Star version too. If you look closely at this art, you will find that every illustration is actually unique. All the different behemoths look a little bit different. All the different cyclopses look a little bit different. All the different angels look a little bit different. It's not necessarily super obvious, but and it's all Dave Trampier art too, and he was a co-designer of the game. And you basically got like 8 sheets like this. And this is a 2 to 8 player game, as I recall. This says 2 to 6. It could be 6. I could be misremembering that. That's possible. The Valley Games version, I'm sure it's nice, but I'd rather have the one with the Trampier art, and the Valley Games version does not. And as Ed Holtzman points out, there is a Java app named Colossus that is a Titan clone. So this is another thing you can go play on the internet now, and this actually might be that. No, this is the Valley Games version. I mean, I got to admit, this is nice looking. But I've got the one with the Dave Trampier art, and I really like Dave Trampier, and I'm not getting rid of that, nor do I need a second copy. Very difficult, and this is why. And it's not just this; it's that this happens in like the first chapter of the book or the second chapter, and it really, it's going to cause a lot of people to tune out, just like it did with the book, frankly, with something like that happening that early. Yeah, well, Jordan at least set somebody up to finish the thing, even if it wasn't him. All right, moving on from Titan. Next up is Avalon Hill's Wizards. At least I assume that this was an original Avalon Hill. Artist Coral Mossbow, whose work I'm not familiar with, and designer by Thomas J. Mossbow. Game of fantasy adventure. And as you can see, there are like these tiles that you put down. This actually looks a lot like Magic Realm, to be completely honest. This is another one that I'm not really familiar with. You could see some hexagon shaped counters with massive Avalon Hill dog ears on them. But this is an interesting cover, and not a bad cover, especially considering when this came out. And this was, here's the box back. Whoops, shit. Here's the back of the box too. So this is giving you some additional information. And wow, I have never owned this game. I have never played this game. This gives me nostalgia willies right here because it reminds me of Powers and Perils, which is one of Avalon Hill's RPGs that they did back in the day. And the back of the box looked a lot like this. The art style was very similar to this as well. This is true, but Jamie at least positioned immediately in Game of Thrones, the novel Game of Thrones, is presented as one of the bad guys and is not the main character. There isn't like one single central character in Martin like there is in Donaldson. This is a good call. We don't. This does actually look kind of neat, and we can see that it doesn't have a good rating, but your guess is as good as mine as to exactly what that means. But it's apparently about completing quests and stuff, which sounds neat. In addition, here's Wizard's Quest from Avalon Hill by Willis Carpenter, Garrett Donner, Michael Steer, and Mick All, released in 1979. Did this come from somebody else? Because it kind of looks like it did. Not obviously so. Also, quite nice cover. I will say quite a nice box art. And this, I've at least seen. Whoops, that's not the right one. I've at least seen the board of this, and this is what the board looks like. So you can see it's an area movement map. You've got these big wizard counters. Those are the wizards, and the smaller counters are other things. I've never played this one either, but it does appear to be somewhat wargamey to me. Meandering Mike says that Wizards was fun until too many islands became inaccessible and your pathing got screwed. Islands? Maybe we don't mean islands, but we mean like isolated troops. I mean, there are main characters in Game of Thrones, but there is not a single protagonist there are a whole bunch of protagonists as opposed to it's just a different way to write a fantasy series, to be honest about it. And yeah, this is absolutely true. And although this came out in 82, did we say that? 82? 79, actually. They clearly were, but they also clearly neither Avalon Hill nor SPI appeared to have a really clear in-house understanding of what an RPG was doing that was different from what a war game would do, right? You can see this in the incredibly bizarre SPI offering, the Dallas, the television role-playing game. And also signs of it in SPI's better regarded RPG. Well, I'm not sure that any of the RPGs from SPI are all that well regarded, but Dragon Quest was actually a pretty good game. Universe has some interesting ideas in it, and it had some potential, but I think ultimately it was just a little too complicated, and there was a much more accessible and easier to find, at least for me, alternative by the time Universe came out. And of course, the third one is Dallas. Dragon Quest was actually pretty good, though. And as Ed Holtzman points out, I have a lot of fondness for we're talking about Wizards and not Wizards Quest. Gotcha. Yeah, Avalon Hill did a lot. They did a lot. I have never read any of the Carl Edward Wagner Kane stuff. I may have read some Carl Edward Wagner in about something else, but not these particular ones, which sounded actually neat. And as Ed Holtzman points out, Powers and Perils was the first real try at an RPG. Yeah, so Powers and Perils was designed by Richard Snyder, who has some other credits, and who was one of Dave Arneson's original players back. I don't know about original, but he was one of Dave Arneson's people back in the day, and actually co-designed the Lands. What was that called? Was it called Lands of Adventure? Was an independent. I'm not sure I remember who published it either. Was another fantasy RPG that was co-designed by Arneson and Richard Snyder. And I think Snyder is not with us anymore, and of course David Arneson is not anymore either. Powers and Perils is an interesting game containing a number of pretty interesting ideas, but which is also kind of high on the complexity level. Creating characters takes a good long time, and you're basically, instead of like determining the results of your combat on a chart, you're actually plugging all the relevant values into an equation and figuring out what the solution is. So it's pretty clunky, but there are some really legitimately neat ideas in it. I really liked the way it handled alignment, for example. Very different from the way D&D alignment worked. There were some really neat creatures. There were some really neat spells. The way the magic work was pretty neat. It was clunky again, but the spells were cool, and the way the magic was set up was pretty cool. I've still got a copy. It's not my original copy, which for some reason I got rid of, and I don't know why. But it's a neat game. Don't play it now. It's not worth your time now. But if you manage to stumble across a cheap copy, it's worth a glance. Let me be clear. All right, so moving on to SPI's Dragon Slayer. Now, the designers that we have credited here are Redmond Simonson and Brad Hessel. Redmond Simonson is, of course, the late, great Redmond Simonson. Brad Hessel's still around. And we can see that we have a really, and this is 80, 81, 79, something like that. Really quite nice looking map, to be completely honest. And this, of course, is a merchandising tie-in for Dragon Slayer, the movie, which is also kind of an underloved movie. In fairness, it takes them a long time to get there. But speaking of Dragon Slayer, So this is true. TSR took Dragon Quest over. They actually did a third edition of Dragon Quest, which was released in a trade paperback, like a perfect bound paperback version. And they did take out all the demons and devils. There was at least one expansion for Dragon Quest that SPI had in the works about magic that I think you can find the draft of floating around online. Great day. Send me a link to this. I may have seen it, but I don't want to have missed anything. All right, yeah, Lands of Adventure was by FGU, was by Leagold. That's not the game I'm thinking of. So, John Huss, thanks for stopping by. All right, so Dragon Slayer, kind of neat looking game. This is one that I kind of keep. Here are the counters, by the way. It's another one of those situations where they really kind of, I don't know if I'd even call these counters. These are more like tiles, because these are for things like the spells and stuff like that. But this is a neat looking game. I'd actually kind of like to try it. But it is not Adventures in Fantasy. Thank you, Brant. That is the David Arneson thing that I was referring to. And indeed, it did fizzle worse than wet fireworks. I don't really know that I would call it a clone of D&D in particular, considering that there were many other RPGs released around that time that were equally or more so D&D clones. But it wasn't very good. I can tell you that. I also once had a copy of it, and it was not good. Mandarin Mike says the Dragon Slayer is better than its rating indicates, folks, which you should already recognize as, take this with an entire salt mine beneath Lake Erie. This is that's fun looking. So this is a publicity still. It says 1983, but SPI was out of business by 1983. So I don't know what that means. Is this an offshore edition of some kind? That's possible. Dragon Slayer 2nd edition. All right, wait a second here. Yeah, so this is a I don't know what the date is, and it says SPI, but this is a UK version. It is in a flat box. I'm not positive I even knew about this. Cool cover though. A lot of text on the cover. You can see that we've got English, French, Italian, looks like, and German or possibly Dutch. That looks more like Dutch to me. So that's interesting. I was not aware that any such version of Dragon Slayer had come out. Were I to acquire this, I would acquire the standard SPI version that fits on my shelves. Now, there's going to be pushback on the next one here, because we might think this is a science fiction game, and it kind of is. But it's really kind of a fantasy game, and it is, of course, John Carter, Warlord of Mars by SPI, featuring one of the all-time great box covers from anybody inside this hobby, with a fabulous Don Mates art cover here, with John Carter, Deja, Thoris, and Woola, the pet, whatever they are. They do. It is called Wizard Kings, and I would actually consider you. It doesn't really. This does not tie into Harn at all. It may be adaptable to Harn. That's possible, but I don't own Wizard Kings. I guess I could change that if I felt like it. So yeah, this is, as Stephen Rochelle points out, this is science fantasy, but science fantasy is fantasy. And if I want to be strictly a pedant about it, all of science fiction is a type of fantasy. Neat game. There's this is a kind of like an interlinked set of different sub games that we could kind of see here. We have the Barsoom map, and we have this tactical map, and we have the city map, and we play a number of different things on this map. I do have this. I do want to play this at some point. It is actually neat. And frankly, this deserves to get played on the strength of this cover alone. It is fabulous. And here's the whole thing. all laid out. We could see that there are cards, there are a fair number of counter sheets, and one map. And it looks like this fella got a counter tray with his too. So at some point, this is undoubtedly true, but yeah, a little bit. I could sort of see that. Yes, this is a Mark Herman. Credited here is Mark Herman as the designer and developer Eric Goldberg. And thank you for including the cover photo, because otherwise I would have had to go get it off the shelf. I do have this. It looks really neat. This was a YouTube eBay pickup for me. All right, next up is a game from Ares, designed by Daryl Esikoff, whose work I am unfamiliar with. Ragnarok, the Twilight of the Gods. This is an interesting looking game, and I think I don't have the other one. I'll find that in a minute. So this is Ragnarok, and it's the Norse gods against the giants. It's exactly what it sounds like. I am going to just guess. I've never handled this. I'm going to guess and say that this looks exactly very similar to something that might have shown up in the Great Medieval Battle Squad, except with giants and Norse gods and stuff like that. And we can get a close look here. We've got some warriors and some frost giants and some Valkyries and all that jazz. We do need to talk about another one that I didn't think to put on the list, which is this one. This is a game I would really like to have, not necessarily for the reason you think. This is a game designed by the late David James Ritchie, who had a career with SPI, later moved on, did a bunch of stuff with TSR, and is now not with us anymore. This is Ares 11, and I'm just going to point out this. Are we getting a really good look at this map? It's not. I'm annoyed by that. We'll find this one. This map is terrific for 1981. And I think there was a box version of this as well. And Noble Knight probably does have this in stock. This is one that I have an eye on. I want to pick this up. Land of Fairy. So you've got a hex map of the British Isles. That's fantasy leading. I could have used this map for our Ars Magica campaign, for Pete's sake. That would have worked completely fine, although the scale wasn't quite right. But in any event, cool looking game by a pretty interesting designer who did a number of interesting things. And I'd like to pick this up at some point. Somebody said there was a boxed version. Turk says there was a thin box version. Board Game Geek doesn't list it, but that doesn't mean anything. They frequently, for these older games, and they don't necessarily have complete information. But this game, the game looks neat. I don't care about this rating at all. The game looks neat. If we look at the counters, you can see that there's all kinds of things like trolls and well, there's a bunch of ruins too. Not fabulous counters, I would have to say, but you can see that there's a bunch of different kingdoms and clans and factions and stuff like that. It's a neat looking game. I'd like to pick it up. I'd love to have it, frankly, just for the strength of the map alone. And this is 1981, but I mean, it's a nice map for 81. I would favorably compare this map to the also late SPI period map for Sicily Race for Messina, which I think both of these maps hold up not too bad even today, 40 plus years later, right? There's a Highlander role-playing game too, which was it licensed? I'm not sure that it was licensed. It may have been an unofficial Highlander role-playing game. Let me put it that way. Ares went away with SPI. I think TSR did publish a couple issues of it, but eventually it got folded into a smaller section in Dragon magazine, where it remained for a number of years. There were something like 13 or 16 total issues of Ares magazine. If we go here, we can actually find out. 16, how about that? So there's some interesting things here too. So Arena of Death. Do I have Arena of Death? I think I do. I do. So what Arena of Death is the combat system from the first edition of Dragon Quest. They also did Citadel of Blood, which was another Dragon Quest tie-in, Barbarian Kings, which somebody mentioned, a whole bunch of science fiction stuff, including the High Crusade, which is based on a Poul Anderson novel, which is a pretty fun novel. Basically, aliens land in like 12th century England, and they are caught pants down by the English, and who take over their spaceship and go on to build a galactic empire. It's actually kind of neat, and a lot of fun. It does appear that they did more sci-fi than fantasy stuff in Ares magazine, though. So Ragnarok also looks cool. The one I would actually prefer to have personally would be Albion. So next up is another one that was done by SPI. This is a Greg Kostikian and Eric Goldberg thing. Do we get an actual title there? Yeah, designed by Greg Kostikian, development by Eric Goldberg. It's SPI, so that may not mean there might not be total clarity on exactly how the responsibilities broke down there. So there's two different versions of this game. There's this box. We'll pull the two different versions. There is a first edition in this blue box that we see up here, and a second edition in what I think is a somewhat more attractive cover. This second edition cover. And this is another interesting game. There's a number. I really wanted this back in the day, too, because this is the game that kind of implied on the back of the box that it was both a fantasy war game and a fantasy RPG. And one of these days, I would actually like to confirm to what extent that claim that was made on the back of the box is accurate. I can tell you that it's kind of expensive on the secondary market. This blue version is the less expensive version. And we can see that people want pretty good prices for it over here. But Noble Knight has it from time to time. And I will get to the Noble Knight spot in just a moment. We're going to finish up Sword and Sorcery here. There's a lot of... the game is well known for its puns. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to actually display any of those. But you can see there's this pretty detailed fantasy map. So it's an interesting looking game. I wouldn't mind having it. I just don't want to pay $200 for it. I think that would, for the novelty value of having it, I think that's probably something I don't need to do. All right. So since we've got people reminding me, let's do the spot from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping Show. So if you don't know, there is, let me pull this down for a moment. If you don't know, I will pull the poll down too. Yeah, and I guess this is true. We're going to close the poll out here, folks, with 73% saying that you play war games regularly, 13% saying you've played quite recently, 15% saying yes, you played, but it was a long time ago, and 0% saying never, which is completely expected given this audience. So once again, we're going to take 30 seconds off here and hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games. There is an affiliate link in the video description. If you were to buy something from Noble Knight and you get to their site through my affiliate link, I get a little bit of store credit in the form, a little bit of kickback in the form of store credit, which is really, really helping out right now, let me tell you. It is kind of the inspiration for this list because the last game I'm going to talk about came in via Noble Knight store credit. So we'll get to that in a moment. So John Longshore, thanks so much for the support here and for everything else you've done for the channel. It is much appreciated. It's great to see you here. All right, so let's hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games. We'll be right back.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, big thanks to our good friends at Noble Knight Games. Again, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping Show. There we go. All right. So back to our talk of fantasy war games. Brant mentions Wotan Games King Arthur. I'm not sure I remember this at all. He says it starts as a quest game where you're gathering your forces, and in the second half is a straight fantasy war games. That sounds somewhat intriguing. Welcome. You know, I am sorry, but this is your responsibility. I'm not telling anybody to buy any of this. But there's some cool stuff in here too. So there's that. All right, so back to the list. Next up, we're going to hit War of the Ring. This is the SPI War of the Ring game licensed from the Tolkien estate. There were several different versions of this as well. It was released in at least 2 different boxed versions, plus a flat tray version, plus a tri-pack called the Games of Middle Earth, which included War of the Ring, as well as 2 much smaller, like folio-sized games called Gondor and Sauron. Gondor, I think, is the Siege of Minas Tirith, so the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. And Sauron, I want to say, was the battle at the Morannon, the Black Gate, into Mordor. That I may or may not be correctly remembering that, but it was also my opinion that neither of the other 2 games were particularly worthwhile. Now here's one cover, and then here's the other cover that were released with this. So this is actually the one I've got. I'm not sure it's exactly the one I've got, but it's my cover looks like this. There's also a designer edition of this too. We'll look at versions in a minute. And then there's this one that uses the art from the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings animated film, which is an interesting film. It's got its virtues. It's got some significant issues as well, over and above the fact that it's only half the book. But you know, I could kind of understand where Bakshi was coming from there, because there's a lot of book to put in here. It's also my opinion that this game is somewhat underrated. Now, I say that from the standpoint of a huge Tolkien nerd, spin down a little bit. So when I expressed my opinion that I think this is an overlooked game, I am aware that it's got balance issues. For example, it's 2 to 3 players. It's not really playable solitaire, particularly. It's 2 to 3 players, and the 3rd player is Saruman. So Saruman, you know, as the book will tell you, starts out, as a serious underdog, but it's going to feel really satisfying if you can manage to pull off a win as Saruman. I think this is a pretty neat game. It does share a bunch of DNA with Freedom in the Galaxy, which was released within a year or 2 of War of the Ring. Design here was Howie Barish and Richard Berg, and based on the similarities in the design between War of the Ring and Freedom in the Galaxy, it feels to me like Howie Barish is the connecting factor there, because Freedom of the Galaxy was Howie and John Butterfield, where this was Howie and Richard Berg. And I think you do see some Bergian elements here as well. Nice thing about this, by the way, is you get this nice tray in the box, and I think the lid on this thing will actually stick, which is also desirable. Those fit. Yeah, that works. All right, I've got a number of additional counters here that need to get punched, and we're just going to pound through them. Also, it's got a pretty nice looking map. We'll look at this picture, and then I need to look at that. Now, this is somebody's. This is a 2-map game, by the way, just to be clear on that. This looks like somebody's reconstruction of the map, but something's not registering correctly for me with this particular map, and I'm not sure why. Because we've got an east map and a west map, but that's not how the maps are laid down. There's a north map and a south map, as I recall. Or is there only one map? I'm kind of thinking there might only be one map, to be honest. All right, so Drew mentions the King Arthur game from the Great Medieval Battles Quad, which is actually a straight fantasy board game. I believe that's supposed to be the Battle of Camlan, where Arthur fights Mordred for the final time. I think. But I've never really closely looked at that either, so what do I know? But no, the map in this is, and I assume this is a Redmond Simonson map work here. I think this map actually is really quite nice. This is somebody doing this at this year, actually. Scott Clinton, the Grumbling Grognard, supersized game in progress in Burleson, Texas, in what looks like a game store. And they do, in fact, have a supersized version of this. That's neat. That's kind of neat. Here's the actual stuff. Nope. It is 2 maps, actually, but it's 12 panels rather than the usual size you would expect on that. And there's cards in this. It's a neat game. Where are we at here? Let's go over here. This is somebody's redone counters, which don't look bad, actually. Now, of course, nowadays, the War of the Ring game that you can actually get is this game from currently Ares. This was originally released by Fantasy Flight. The 2nd edition was released by Ares. And I have played this, and it is also a very solid game. It is... It feels to me less wargamey than the old one, than the SPI War of the Ring game. But, you know, to some extent, that might be that game has hexes and counters, and this game has areas and little dudes. And that's probably a factor, because I like hexes and counters, and I have less fondness for little dudes. Professor Albion mentions a lot of the dungeon crawl, basically fantasy games. There's a lot of games like this nowadays. I'm having some contrast problems here. Warhammer Marines. I don't know what that would even be. Are we talking about like Space Hulk? Because Space Hulk is basically space dungeon crawl, right? And of course, Danny brings up the all-time classic song from the Rankin Bass animated Return of the King, which I actually also have a lot of fondness for. I think, frankly, it's in certain respects, I think it's a better adaptation of the source material than Peter Jackson did. In some respects, that is not an overall complaint about the Peter Jackson thing. This might be the special edition. Yeah, they've done like at least 2 different super duper fancy versions of this too. This looks pretty fancy. There are a pile of expansions for this. It's a solid game, and it is a kind of a straight war game. But I mean, you are going to have cards and funny looking dice and things like that in it as well. There are a couple of direct homages to the Bakshi film in the specifically, as Mike Reed points out, in the Fellowship of the Ring film. I feel like I'm doing great on clipping counters and not nearly good as well at drinking whiskey. So, yeah, the Hildebrands. This is also true. There's some great Hildebrand. I forget which Hildebrand it is, but there's some great Hildebrand art. And as Brant reminds us, the Armchair Dragoons will be going live tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. With their first public Tuesday Newsday show. This is something I've been yelling at Brant to do for years, so I think it's great that he's finally taken my advice. Probably because somebody else gave him advice that says, you should do this as a video. And he ignored what I told him. All right. I am not going to make the case that the SPI War of the Ring is a flawless design or anything like that, but it is fun to play. It has terrific Middle-earth flavor. and I enjoy it quite a bit. So I could say that I could make the same complaints about the Ares game, to be completely honest about it. I think it's got some issues as well. Are they serious issues? Don't really think so. But it is a much tidier. It is a much tidier design than the SPI game. Oh, okay. We needed that. All right. So moving on. We should, of course, talk about Demons, the game of evil spirits. This was one of the little folio games from SPI. And this is not one that I had back in the day. But if we look at the counters, you'll see that I think you're summoning demons, and then there's these mortal powers, and those are the powers that are summoning the demons. And you're playing stuff out on this. We just had a good shot of it. This is the map. If this map looks a lot to you like, say, the map to Drive on Mets, then me too. It's a very straightforward looking game. It's a Dunnigan design, which is interesting in and of itself. Then again, so was Dallas, the television role-playing game. And all right, we have now clipped, and we're going to bag all of the. Am I out of baggies? I'm out of baggies. I mean, I've got baggies. They're just in the drawer. This will work. I think I remember this article in Moves, actually. All right, Mike says that some versions of War of the Ring had perforated cards and some had better cards with rounded corners and glossy stock. I don't recall off the top of my head what mine has, but I'm pretty sure it's the perforated cards. I can definitely tell you that my copy of Freedom of the Galaxy, which also has cards, are the perforated cards, as well as the Avalon Hill version of the same game. I've heard a number of people point this out. Mike Reed points out that you can really see the DNA between Ares War of the Ring and Dune War for Arrakis, which is, I believe, from Simon, which is not a company I have any affinity with at all. I'm curious to hear more about the Colbert Lord of the Rings project. I consider all of this, just because it's Hollywood, I consider it all tentative until stuff starts to get announced in Variety or Hollywood Reporter. Quinto's Beast Lord and Mythology did not make the list, actually. This is not something I need. So moving on from Demons, now we're crossing into territory where there's a direct RPG tie-in. And this is some of the stuff that I had to pull out of RPG Geek. So first up is, and I'm not zoomed in here, which is weird. First up is this product. Image is not available. What the fuck? Oh, that worked. Okay. Michael S. Dobson, Red Arrow, Black Shield. This is one of the expert rules modules, and it depicts a war in the known world that was established by this time for the regular D&D, not advanced D&D game. It comes with, I think, 2 counter sheets, as I recall. That looks correct. And these are the exact high quality counter sheets you've come to expect from TSR, and an incredibly colorful map. But the game is neat. The module is actually kind of neat as well. And there's role-playing elements plus a war game in here. Now, the key conceit here is that this battle system deal. Battle system was released in, I want to say, the AD&D first edition era, but it was late in the first edition era, and it was the miniatures rules for D&D that were published at that time. Fuck is this? Well, it ain't important. So you could play this with the battle system rules if you want, but you can also play it with the war machine, which is the D&D mass combat system that originally appeared in the D&D companion set, and which was later in the D&D rules cyclopedia. I would strongly prefer to play such a thing using War Machine than I would with the battle system rules, which I had back in the day and which sucked ass. We've also got this. Now, this is divisive too. The D&D Gazetteer module. So there was a series back in the day of the D&D known world Mystara that started with the Grand Duchy of Karamikos. And there were, I don't know, 15 or so different products, a couple of box sets that kind of expanded this. And it was kind of a paint by numbers type of setting. You had, here's the Viking setting, and here's the Viking country, and here's the Arab country, and here's the Native American country, and here's the Renaissance country, here's the Wizards Kingdom, and here's the Thieves Kingdom, and here's the Adventurers Kingdom, where the whole country is run by adventurers, which is a bit absurd. The Orcs of Thar is the orcs of the known world, and includes a whole game called Orc Wars, which we don't have any pictures of here. I thought I would be curious to know what other people thought of this thing, because I thought this was dog shit at the time. It's very jokey. It's if you don't mind that, then okay, but I was certainly not cool with it at the time. We could honestly do a whole show topic about this. I would, if you're really interested in Satanic Panic stuff. Seth Skorkowski did a video 6 months ago or so about the whole Satanic Panic, and he does a very good job going through a lot of the different elements and stages that went through. And I'm not going to try and regurgitate any of that. So not a big fan of the Orcs of Thar personally, but I did like a number of the Gazetteers, and this was number 10 in that series. Also, this all comes right around the same general period here, folks. That was 1988. This is 1986, Dragons of Glory. So you'll recall back in the day, they had the Dragonlance series of adventures, of which there were 12, but then there were more later. This is a huge Dragonlance war game in it that allows you to fight out the entire War of the Lance. Unfortunately, RPG Geek is a lot less rich with photographs than Board Game Geek is, so this is pretty much as good as it gets, and this is a pretty crappy photograph. But this is another one that I actually kind of like to look at this, but I don't want to look at it so badly that I'm going to go run it down for whatever it costs. Do we have a BG Marketplace thing here? Probably not. 150 from Noble Knight. Is that unpunched? That is unpunched. That's not a bad price, actually, for unpunched Dragons of Glory. I've got a number of the old Dragonlance modules. I don't have this one. Well, Mike Reed, I could tell you this. My Thunderbolt is 100% clipped at this time. So we've mentioned Citadel of Blood. And as Joe Green points out, it was designed by Eric Lee Smith. Master of the Nomads. This is just a module, though. I guess you could call Nemo's War a fantasy game. A war game? I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Okay, so Mean Joe Green brings up Thieves World, turned into a game from Mayfair. Do I have that? No. Okay, so people get these confused all the time. And last time I did a short on this, and I immediately confused people. So there's Thieves World, which is the shared world series of anthologies, mostly done by or spearheaded by Robert Asprin, the late Robert Asprin, of course, of which there was a bunch of anthologies, and a number of different writers were involved. There's some good stories in there, especially in the first couple of books. There was a Thieves World set released by Chaosium that provided statistics to use that setting in a number of different RPG systems, including some weird ones like Traveler. There's also a completely separate game line called Thieves Guild, which was from Game Lords. People get those mixed up all the time. But I think what Joe Green is talking about is there's a Thieves World board game that was released by Mayfair. I liked Birthright quite a bit, for the record. Sanctuary Thieves World by Bill Fawcett. That would be the Mayfair version. So Thieves Guild is actually kind of neat. I mean, they kind of try to turn it into its own whole system. And honestly, that didn't really work. But like, there was a lot of really cool thiefy stuff in the modules for it. A lot of cool adventures, a lot of cool plots, a lot of cool hooks, NPCs, all that stuff. And if you were really super duper interested, you get some rules in there too. As we close in on the last games I have to talk about, I'm gonna take a step to the side and show Europa Universalis: The Price of Power. Not because this is a fantasy war game, although if I were feeling in a wise ass mood, I could probably call it that. This is a super intricate, highly designed, let's put it that way. I'd call this a war game, to be honest, although there's substantial non-war elements as well. But this is a really cool game. So what I was thinking was, has somebody done a fantasy game like this? And the answer is probably Burning Banners. As you can see, this has just arrived, courtesy of our good friends at Noble Knight and the fine folks who are kind enough to have supported the channel by using the Noble Knight affiliate link. And I think this game looks extremely impressive. There's a whole fantasy world in here that's got a lot of detail. It's got a lot of components. It's got a shit ton of scenarios. And it didn't even occur to me to film an unboxing video when I opened this, by the way. But it's very modular in the sense you could play it with 1 map scenarios, 2 map scenarios, 4 map scenarios, whatever. There's a ton of scenarios in here. There's a lot going on in this game, and the production quality is really nice. So I look forward to playing this and possibly doing some video about it. Danny says Bill is still confused about Burning Banners selling so many copies like crazy. Honestly, they've printed this multiple times already. There will be an expansion for it. I'm very curious to see that. There's space here to do a volume 2. There's a fair amount of video from Burning Banners on YouTube, some of which is by Chris Muller, the designer. If you don't know the YouTube channel Thursday Night Gamers, that's Christopher Muller, the designer of this. He's done some graphic novels, which were really good, by the way. There's a role-playing connection here as well, because one of the graphic novels, well, maybe all of the graphic novels that Christopher Muller did, were turned into a role-playing game called Burning Empires. This is the same people who did the Burning Wheel, and it's a very similar system and a very nice book. I've never played this. However, I do have an anecdote about it. At one point, I was super duper interested in Burning Wheel as a system, but I'm like reading the book and saying, I don't know how this is actually supposed to work in practice. So Origins was coming up, so I signed me and several people from our group up to play in a demo game by Luke Crane, the designer of Burning Wheel and this. And during that game, this is actually a famous story now. During that Burning Wheel game that Luke was running, the Origins Awards were happening. So this was Saturday night, and he won for Burning Empires. I forget which award. And a huge posse of people like flowed into the room to announce this and hand them the trophy and take pictures and all that stuff. I was a player in that Burning Wheel game, and it's a pretty cool story. Greyhawk Wars, I didn't bring up in part because, again, I thought Greyhawk Wars was dog shit. I think that this is amenable to an RPG, although I got to tell you, I'm not sure I'd be interested particularly. Honestly, I've never been a huge fan of. Well, let's wrap Burning Banners up, and I'll riff on this. Very impressive looking game. We have close the screen share here. Terrific art. Christopher Muller is a fantastic artist. If you don't know, he's done a bunch of stuff for OSG and the Library of Napoleonic Battles series, a bunch of like box art and stuff. Plus, he's done a bunch of his own things. Let's actually look at his BGG credits here. And is the designer of Napoleon's Eagles and Napoleon's Eagles 2. That's also true. And Brothers at War, 1861 and 1862. So some very solid games by Mr. Muller here. And I've read the graphic novels. I don't own the graphic novels. I think I had to get them out of the library because they're hard to find. The graphic novels are called Iron Empires. You may be able to find this at this point. That was the origin story. What are you talking about? I mean, I've got a million origin stories, to be fair. But I am very impressed with what I've seen from Burning Banners in particular. It's a very nice package. It's behind me and actually the whole thing's on here too, and it looks like it's going to fall, so I'm going to take it down. Very heavy box. The box is packed solid. I clipped the entire punch, because it's all pre-rounded too, in like half an hour. And it's basically ready to go and would be a pretty splendid game to do some video on, to be completely honest about it. I didn't like From the Ashes either, First and Funky, but I have a specific reason for that. And this is the same reason why I'm not a fan of Greyhawk Wars. That reason is I have always felt that the strength of Greyhawk as a setting for D&D is just the open nature of it. It's a very skeletal framework on top of which you're supposed to put your own stuff in or slot the official modules in, whatever you want to do. But at one point, TSR appeared to not understand what the difference was between the approach taken to design Greyhawk as this broad framework and the approach taken to design Forgotten Realms, which would mean we're going to do a source book for every goddamn thing. So we got a lot of Greyhawk supplements, and most of them were wretched back in this particular era. So we are on topic, but that's more or less accident. I did say we were going to end up talking about more stuff last week, but and not just war games, but what that means is I feel like this show kind of needs to be about whatever I want to talk about, and I'm going to try and move more structured conversations into their own videos. So for those who fear that we won't be talking about war games, the very first topic we did was a wargaming topic. So well, there are other issues with Burning Wheel. I do think there's a lot I like about Burning Wheel. There's also I think the rule book itself is poorly organized and poorly written as a rule book. There are some really neat mechanical ideas in there that the game simply does not explain, and you just have to kind of try to play it and figure it out. And you may or may not figure out what the designer intended, which is the problem that we had. So my interest in running Burning Wheel pretty much ended with that game that Luke ran back in the day. And I realized this is probably, I like a lot of what the system's doing. I like the way it handles life paths and all that stuff. And I didn't really like a lot of the other things that it was doing. And in particular, the execution of the entire project. Now I can concentrate on drinking whiskey. And this stuff is good. So here's the thing with Burning Wheel. It made a lot of big claims about how innovative it was and how novel it was. And a lot of people repeated those claims. And I repeated some of those claims. And again, I think there's some really good ideas in the game that are perhaps not as well developed as I would like. And I think the actual rule book's approach of we don't actually need to explain how these new and novel ideas work in practice to be absolutely infuriating. And one of the follow-up games from the same group of people called Torchbearer explicitly says that. It says, you're going to read this rule book and you're not going to understand how to play. You're not going to figure out how to play this game until you're like 5 or 6 sessions in. And at that point, Torchbearer went back on the shelf and has never been touched since. Because I think that's a cop-out. I think that is a cop-out. We're going to be so lazy that we're just going to acknowledge that we're not really going to try to explain how the game works to you. We're just going to say, yeah, here you go, figure it out. I mean, fine, but don't necessarily expect your experience in that game to line up at all with anybody else's experience in that game, much less the designer's original intention. And you can make, I suspect that a similar statement could be made about some war games that I can think of. So, all right. So Burning Banners, the RPG. I am not super interested in this. I like what I see of the cool fantasy setting. I think it's solid work. I went 100% behind playing the board game, war game. For an RPG setting, I don't typically like to play in other people's settings. I like to design settings. I like to do my own settings. There's exceptions to that. I really love Harn, for example, and I will 100% do another Harn game at some point. They did do a Torchbearer second edition, and I don't know if that was something that was resolved with it. I will say that the page count in the second edition is higher, but they're digest size books instead of a normal size book. It is very gamey. But if you think about it, D&D is super duper gamey, right? There's a lot of weird abstractions in D&D that people, the people who really love D&D just accept. And that's fine. But if you think of it as a gamist design, which is explicit in the rules, Torchbearer, that is, it bears a lot of resemblance to D&D in that sense. And it is a game about dungeon crawling too. I think that if I were to run such a thing that was focused on dungeon crawling, I would probably be more inclined to pick Shadow Dark or something like that, which also has some really strong gamist elements in it, by the way the torches work, for example. So torches in, I don't know that anybody had ever done this before, but Torchbearer might have. Swords and Wizardry has real-time torches. So the torches last, I think it's an hour or 2 hours or something like that, of real time. So when you light a torch, you wander around in the dungeon with the torch, you set a timer, and when the timer goes off, the torch goes out in whatever the actual period is, which I guess you could change. Now, on the other hand, I do think this the idea of doing an RPG for Burning Banners is a good idea. I think it's very amenable to that. Okay, Dave Poirier says it's 1 hour, so that's fine. I haven't played Shadow Dark. I like Shadow Dark in terms of the way it presents its game system. I think it's top tier presentation. I am less attracted by the game system, to be honest about it. Richard Lord says most fantasy rags are park your real world brain at the door and just enjoy the crazies. I mean, certainly this is well within the tradition established by Dungeons and Dragons. But if, say, you're running a game in Middle Earth, whether that's MERP or the One Ring or even D&D, because there's books for that now, you might take it more seriously than that. I'm a little less stuck up now about taking things very seriously than for RPGs, especially fantasy RPGs, than I was back in the day. So if something like it works with Thar or Greyhawk Wars, I disliked for different reasons, to be honest about it. I think they just completely missed the point. I do think that Burning Banners has a lot of potential as a game with crossover capabilities. I would be curious to see if Compass would produce an RPG version of it. That would be very interesting. I could totally see that Shadow Dark does play very well for large groups and newbies because it's D&D 5th edition, folks, but it's extremely streamlined. It's extremely well presented and succinctly presented. I picked it up at Origins and I'm pretty pleased with. I don't know that I'd run it, but I mean it's a nice game. I'm not the guy to run games in a random setting. Mark Hodgkinson, thanks for stopping by. To be fair, I feel the same about a lot of other settings for role-playing games. I would be reluctant to play there are plenty that I would use, but those tend to be games that I can then take and do what I want with them. Harn is like that, for example. The Traveler Universe, the official Traveler Universe, which again I am not using, is another one like that. Are there mechanics that are different in Burning Banners? I haven't dug deeply enough into the mechanics to talk intelligently about this yet. But hopefully I'll get some video done about it. That would be optimal. I'm not sure where such video is going to be filmed because right now my entire table is being consumed by GCACW and Thunderbolt. This is, and you get these memorable moments. This happens in Wargames too, right? So I remember this is not intended as a tremendously entertaining story or anything. It's just an example. When we played La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean, by the way, there's a unboxing coming of the new edition of WoW that came out relatively recently from Clash of Arms. That'll be popping up in a couple of weeks. We're playing, and I'm running mostly I'm running one of the French wings, but most of that wing is on the French left, and it's mostly cavalry. And the cavalry was tremendously fun to play. So I'm running the French cavalry, and the British opponent on that particular flank is controlling a lot of like Dutch troops and German troops and stuff like that. So not a lot of British. The British tend to be the better troops. So his troops weren't that good. His numbers weren't that good. And he was rolling like dog shit. It was extremely memorable to see Kellerman's heavy cavalry just charge and fucking flatten entire infantry battalions. It was so much fun. And you get a role-playing games naturally generate those kinds of memorable moments, right? I've got a million stories from the old days of Rollmaster, for example, and a few from D&D, to be honest about it. But I really feel like I didn't play much good D&D until like the 90s when we were playing Birthright. I didn't run that, by the way. That was somebody else was running, but I had a ton of fun playing that back in the day. And I think that's one of the underrated, underappreciated Dungeons and Dragons settings at this point is Birthright. And there's a bunch of good ones. Forgotten Realms is actually fine. However, if I were going to run the Forgotten Realms, this is how I would do it. I would get the original Forgotten Realms box set and like the first 3 or 4 modules that they did for it, maybe even only the first one, which is the Waterdeep one. That and Savage Coast, I think I would pick. Yeah, you got more than enough material there. It's not super bloated at that level of material. And I would just say, look, this is the world, man. It's what's in this box and these 2 modules, and that's it. And I would not the critical results in Rollmaster. This swings both ways, folks. Somebody asked, where was this? I forget where this was. Somebody asked, what's the most overrated, overpowered RPG class? And somebody, not me, said, oh, it's the Archmage from Rollmaster. So if you don't know, Rollmaster has 3 realms of power. Essence, which is wizardy type magic. Channeling, which is clericy type magic. And Mentalism, which is psionic-y type magic. And the Archmage, or Arcanist later on, could use spells from all 3 realms. Horrifically overpowered character. And you know what? In Rollmaster, it didn't much matter. That character, I made a high elf Archmage. I don't remember what his name was, but I liked that character a lot. And he eventually, he died because somebody conjured an anvil over his head and rolled like a 99 on the critical result for that. And he was crushed and splattered all over the dungeon floor. But it wasn't a D6, it wasn't a 66. So if you generally want higher on those tables, but if you roll a 66 on the Rollmaster critical tables, it's a particularly spectacular or messy result of some kind. But we had a lot of fun with Birthright. I think, but once again, Birthright, the whole, like the way the mass combat worked was pretty weak. And there's a number of other things that I think were a little dumb, but we just ignored those things. So for example, in Birthright, the basic conceit is that you, the player characters, are either rulers of these domains in your own right, or you are a group from a single domain where this person is the prince and this person is the high wizard and this person is the high priest and that. And that's how we did it. And but you're all still first level, right? And that kind of is a weird thing. And then when they published adventures for it, it was like, oh, the king and the national, the chief wizard and the high priest and the guild master of thieves are going to go into a dungeon and do like first level dungeon adventures, and that was dumb. And I'm not sure they did any other adventures that weren't like that for Birthright, but beyond that, and we just didn't run it that way. And we may have gone on. We did some combat stuff, but we never really did like where all the prince and his court are all traveling to the keep on the borderlands, and we're going to go kill goblins. We never did that. This was actually my buddy who was running it at the time liked to use some of the old D&D magic items. But he would rewrite them. So he did his own version of the Deck of Many Things, for example, which I think did show up once. Another one that showed up a couple of times was his custom version of the Wand of Wonder. If you remember that, you would activate the Wand of Wonder and you'd roll on a table to see what actually happens. And in this case, I had the Wand of Wonder, and I zapped somebody with the Wand of Wonder, and an anvil appeared over my head and crushed me flat. So... Oh yeah, John Huss. You were playing on the other side of the battlefield, though. John was in that L'Habitaille de Mont Saint Jean game. Tremendous fun. I was super worried going into that game. It's like, I've never played this before. I have read the rules. I am very unconfident in my ability to run all this fucking cavalry that they have given me. And it turned out that I was pretty good with the cavalry. I was terrible with the artillery. I muffed the artillery very badly. But the cavalry was so much fun that kind of is what I remember about the week that we played it. It was fantastic. You can run Birthright and ignore the Regent stuff if you want. There's a certain Highlander element in Birthright 2 where there are like divinely empowered beings of which you are one. And if you kill one, then you can like absorb its power and gain Regency points or whatever they were called back in the day, and then get these new fancier powers. Birthright was pretty cool. But let's face it, TSR, especially back in the day, and I guess even Wizards of the Coast, did a lot of settings that weren't that good either. And I do not particularly like a number of their settings. Greyhawk, I think it was great as a loose framework. And when they started to lose the mission statement on Greyhawk, then it turned into a much less awesome package, because it was trying to be Forgotten Realms, and Greyhawk's not Forgotten Realms. So Neil Badke had a great Birthright run and can confirm that there's nothing cooler than casting Plasma Bolt in Rollmaster. That's absolutely true. Dale Brady can vouch for Burning Banners. eBay Dragons of what? This seems nutty to me. New shrink wrap or no, we're not doing $2,000 for anything at this point. Oh, well, this will be okay for me, Perigi, because I don't really play with that many Eurogamers. That's not to say there's anything wrong with Eurogames or Eurogamers. It's just it's not really the audience of people I tend to play these kinds of games with. So, it is very much Burning Banners looks to me so far designed like a war game. Okay, it plays like a war game. I would say the same thing about Stellar Horizons and Stellar Horizons 2. They are designed like war games and play kind of like war games. Stellar Horizons less so of a war game. You will probably see combat happen in a game of a full game anyway of Stellar Horizons, but it's a very peripheral element. Whereas in Burning Banners, it's a war game, right? There are also advanced rules and a bunch of extra stuff that you can add into the game, and there's a lot there. There's a lot of play value in that box. And last I checked, I'll tell you what, this has been on my Noble Knight wish list forever, and it keeps selling out. So I'll I got some Noble Knight credit. I'll go look at it now. And it's sold out again. Okay, well, I got a message that says, hey, Burning Banners is in stock. And then I go look at the webpage 2 days later, and it's sold out again. So that's why it took that long to get it in. But it's a pretty impressive game. I'm pretty impressed with it, and I am basically sold on it. John, you had some bad die rolling too. Now, Troy, in that same game, who was playing the British Right, said that he had never seen such a spectacular series of failed die rolls before. And Troy clearly hasn't played enough with me, because that's just regular gameplay for me, is making a catastrophic series of failed die rolls. Keep on the Borderlands originally is very unspecified as to exactly where it is supposed to be. It is not discreetly set in Mystara. I mean, it's easy to make that inference, because Mystara then, in the later edition of the basic set and expert set, kind of becomes the standard Dungeons and Dragons setting for that wing of Dungeons and Dragons at the time. But if you look at the module, there's nothing Mystara specific about it. You could put this thing anywhere, and it might even mention, if you want to put it in Greyhawk, where you can do that. Yeah, I mean, you can fight the other factions in Stellar Horizons, but usually what it'll mostly look like is you cleaning up pirates. The players generally, as Paul Sin says, are generally going to be consumed with other stuff other than just shooting at each other. When Dark Sun came out, I bought it with great eagerness, thinking that it was going to be a Barsoom type of planet, and it wasn't. There are some interesting features of Dark Sun. I've never been particularly fond of it as a product. Hollow World is actually, I think, a little more interesting, although it did do the same thing that they did in a lot of places in Mystara, where they just took real-world cultural analogs and plugged them in. And the same thing applies to Hollow World, which was linked to that. Everyday says first place in Mystara in the 1983 expert set. That would have been the Frank Metzner expert set, I think, and not the Zeb Cook and Tom Moldvay expert set that I had back in the day. I've got a copy of. Actually, I don't know what this is worth now. It might be worth a bundle. Goodman Games did this series of original adventures reincarnated. I don't have all of them, but I've got this one, and this has like a reprint of the original module in it, as well as an updated D&D 5th edition version of the module, which is also expanded. And there's cool pictures of, here's Gary holding Luke as a baby, for example. Luke's still with us, and Luke seems to be doing okay. I'm happy to report. So here's Luke as a kid. So there's a bunch of cool things in these books. Some of them are super expensive. I've got this one and The Lost City, which is another favorite module from back in the day. I would have liked to have gotten the Isle of Dread, but that thing goes for like $200 or $300 now. Dark Sun works better as a non-D&D setting. I would probably be inclined to agree with this, and I would probably stipulate further that Birthright works better as a non-D&D setting as well. Interesting. Richard Lord asks, could a setting be worked out in, this is Jack L. Chalker's Dance Band on the Titanic? I mean, sure, you could totally do that. If I was going to do something like this is a natural fit for GURPS, by the way. There was a Jack Chalker licensed RPG from Pacesetter back in the day, based on his Midnight at the Well of Souls books. First and Funky, also Planescape. I would also agree with that. And that's another one where I think the natural choice for that would be GURPS, because you just do anything. Up to a certain power level where GURPS starts to become a little on the shaky side. Well, we got to finish this off. All right, so this week, there might be another video. There might be a video tomorrow, but it's Monday and tomorrow is Tuesday, and so I haven't edited anything yet for tomorrow. But already scheduled are unboxing videos of the new edition of Ace of Aces from Mayfair Games and Mr. B. There's a unboxing of La Bataille de Wab, which is an expansion for other La Bataille games. So you need to have some other stuff to play it. But I'll talk about all that in the unboxing video. And 3 days of Gettysburg Deluxe, and that will actually be out on Thursday. Callahan's Crosstime Saloon, there was a GURPS book for that. Mannery Mike says a new-ish copy of Goodman Games Into the Borderland will cost about $100 to $120. That's not that bad, because I've looked at the Isle of Dread one. I've got the original module. I don't care that. I'm not paying $200 for it. Oh, I did. And I've actually got this too. One of the weirdest looking maps in Wargames. Oh, TSR. Don't even get me started on this. This was a classic TSR era misfire. Let me put it that way. Michael Pratt reminds us all to thumbs up the video as we wrap the show up for tonight. We did go the full 2 hours, so that was pretty cool. There was a lot of cool stuff in Planescape, to be honest, but to say that D&D is the natural system for it, I think would be a weird statement to make. But Holden Messerschmitt, his fantasy war game would have a seasonal affected hex grid map, naval battle sieges, army slaying wizards, heroes, dragons, unicorns versus centaur, cavalry battles, giants, siege weapons, fairies, plagues, and plundering. This sounds awesome. You should design it and then let us know. Ooh, Spelljammer. Ooh. I never liked Spelljammer either, to be completely honest. Sorcerer is a little psychedelic, to be completely honest. If you want to, engage in the consumption of some mushrooms or something and then play Sorcerer, that sounds like an interesting idea. It is also, though, I believe, a Redmond Simonson design, which there's not that many of, which is kind of why I wanted it. I have picked it up. So we're going to wrap this up at this point, folks. I would like to thank everybody for coming out this evening. Do remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. Remember that there are a bunch of ways to help support the show and the channel listed in the video description. I'm trying to do more videos here. I'm trying to do 2 a week. We'll see. We've missed several weeks at this point, but at least I've got 1 a week scheduled for the next 3 weeks. It's all done. They're all uploaded. They're all ready to go. So we're good. So once again, thanks everybody. And we'll see you all again soon.